everyone, and welcome back to Malice in the Mitten. I am your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Trace.
This is Season 1, Episode 6, Part 2 of Gwendolyn Graham and Catherine Wood's The Alpine Manor Murders. Do you want to give us a recap?
Yes. The two women come from two different walks of life. The two of them get together. They're now living together. The husband and the child are away. They got sent away from Cathy. They're getting into BDSM kind of stuff. They're on this slippery slope, but they're just going off the rails. We learned all about them, so now we're going to get into why we're talking about them. They are lethal lovers. Cathy, as you ended the last episode with, Cathy would do anything to keep Gwen. We're already kind of painting Cathy as like the sucker. So let's get into it, because I don't know if I'm on the same page that Cathy's the sucker. I think that Gwen might be a maniacal manipulator, but let's see. Let's get into it before I get my judgy self underway.
Okay, because it definitely will unfold, and you might be surprised at how it comes out. Both Gwen and Cathy worked the same shifts at Alpine, meaning they worked at night together. They would pick up all the overtime shifts they could with one another so they could spend more time together and have more money to support their partying habits. Soon, a love pact was formed in order to keep the two bonded together forever. A pact that had the deepest of consequences. A pact that, if broken, would change their lives forever. It wasn't unusual for the elderly residents at Alpine Manor to pass away. Some were quite old, some in their 60s with Alzheimer's and dementia. They needed full care. Soon, it seemed that their patients were dying at an increased rate, more than they had in the past. Approximately 10 months after Cathy and Gwen sparked up their heated love affair, they broke up and Gwen moved out. Now that she was alone, Cathy went to visit her ex-husband. She was crying and told Ken that she and Gwen had broke up and that Gwen had moved out. She was pretty upset while she was crying, and Ken kind of knew, Cathy pretty well and felt that there was just more to the story, so he continued to ask her what else was bothering her. She finally said that she and Gwen had done things that she was ashamed of at work. When Ken pushed for more information, she said, quote, "What is the worst thing you can think of?" Cathy told Ken that between January and April of 1987, she had helped Gwen kill 5 residents. They were killed by being smothered with a washcloth in the middle of the night while the residents were asleep. The killings were a game for Cathy and Gwen. These acts were not just random. The game was to kill residents who had initials that would spell the word murder. Since Cathy came to his place and was spilling her secrets, I'm sure Ken felt that the window of opportunity was opening and that Cathy would soon be coming back to him and their daughter. However, the next morning, Cathy left and went back to Gwen. As you can imagine, Ken really didn't know what to do with all of this information. He didn't know if this was just another one of Cathy's stories to get him to feel bad for her or not. Initially, did not go to the police after Cathy's confession. It actually took him a full year before he went to the authorities. Perhaps it was his unending loyalty to his ex-wife that kept him from going to the police. Ken loved Cathy, and he wanted nothing more than for her to come home and to be a family once more. However, as time went on, he started to realize that his hopes of Cathy coming back were not going to happen. Ken finally couldn't keep the secret any longer and told the police everything he knew.
Okay, so right there, I'm thinking to myself, what's up with Ken, dude? That's sus. I mean, what kind of delusion was Ken in? And why would he want somebody back that obviously didn't want him, obviously didn't want to be a mom to his daughter, didn't want any of the things that he wanted, but because he felt attached to her in some kind of weird way and was obviously deeply in love with her in his own weird way, but he's going to hold on to that information for a whole year waiting and pining for her? Or did he just hold it into his pocket because they got into a bad fight? I just feel like that whole thing is sus to me. Hold on to information like that for a year.
Exactly. I mean, he's so wound up about this girl that, think about it. If Cathy had come back to him, he wouldn't have said anything, is my thought. He would have just swallowed it and, okay. But hey, now that she's not coming back to me, like a whole year, that's a little bit crazy. When the police contacted Alpine Manor to inquire about the deaths that may have taken place, they did say they had an uptick in deaths, but that deaths were all of natural causes. The records were handed over to the police for their review. They also handed over the HR files of Gwen and Cathy. At this time, both Cathy and Gwen were no longer working at Alpine Manor. The police were having a difficult time believing the crazy story Ken had told them, but as they were going through the patient files, they were struck with what they were seeing, and all of a sudden, Ken's story was proving to be credible.
The first resident that was murdered was Marguerite Chambers on January 18th, 1987. She was just 60 years old with severe advanced Alzheimer's disease. Next was Myrtle Luce on February 9th. She was 95 years old. Then Mae Mason on February 16th. She was 79 years old. Belle Burkhardt on February 25th. She was 74 years old. And lastly, Edith Cook on April 6th. She was 98 years old. All of the victims they chose were not only to spell out murder, they were also chosen because they were nonverbal or so demented that people wouldn't believe them if they were able to say something. The uptick of patients that had died at the manor during this time frame was approximately 40, but only these 5 could be directly tied to Cathy and Gwen.
At this point, the police started looking for Cathy and Gwen. When they located and brought Cathy to the police department, she said it was all a joke and that Ken never got over the fact that she had left him for another woman. But when the police started showing Cathy the patient records and what they knew, she began to confess. But all the while, she put all of the blame on Gwen. Cathy said that one night while working, she was looking for Gwen to go on break with her. She found her over Marguerite with a washcloth over Marguerite's nose and mouth. Cathy was extremely upset, but she said that Gwen said she was suffering and she was helping her. When Gwen and Cathy went home that night, Gwen was supercharged and they had the most amazing sex. Cathy said Gwen told her that this wouldn't be the only patient and that they would continue to do this to prove their love and devotion to one another. This was their love pact. If one or the other left the relationship, then the other could put the one who left in prison for the rest of their life. Because Cathy didn't want to lose Gwen, she agreed. Cathy would be the lookout, while Gwen would smother the resident. After each murder, Gwen would take something of the victim as a souvenir. Over the next few months, a total of 5 patients were murdered. After each murder, they again would have amazing sex.
I don't know why I was expecting 2 psychotic people to actually make sense. I don't know. Sometimes you're just still looking for the sense of it all.
Right. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't.
All right. So, cool. Took tokens.
Yep, they took some tokens. Prior to the breakup between Gwen and Cathy, a young nurse's aide named Robin started at Alpine. Gwen was incredibly attracted to Robin, and it wasn't long after they met that the two of them started to have an affair behind Cathy's back. Soon, Gwen left Cathy for Robin, and after a difficult breakup, Gwen and Robin packed up Gwen's car and left for Texas. When police caught up with her, she was working at a hospital, and get this, a children's ward.
Oh, Jesus. We're not going to get into children again, are we, Trace? You're killing me here.
No, I promise. We're not talking about that.
Okay.
I just found it shocking that she had a job working with children in a hospital.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
And frightening. And I was hoping that we weren't going to get into that. Hopefully she didn't work there for long.
I hope not. I don't think she did, just a couple of months. When police questioned Gwen about the deaths at Alpine Manor, she denied everything. She said that Cathy was making everything up to get back at her for leaving her and moving to Texas with her new girlfriend. After living and dating Cathy for almost a year, Gwen couldn't take Cathy's overbearing jealousy any longer. Gwen did consent to a polygraph, but it was inconclusive and she was free to go. Cathy had also taken a polygraph when first questioned by police. Her results were also inconclusive, but the police felt like she was holding something back. When Cathy had taken her second polygraph, after 3 hours, she confessed that she wasn't an innocent bystander for the murders. It was the two of them, not Gwen, that came up with the idea of killing the patients at Alpine Manor. The police had recovered a poem that Cathy wrote to Gwen. Cathy said for each patient they killed together, they would renew their love pledge to one another. The poem would evolve with each murder they committed. So, for example, I will love you forever in 1 day. Then, I will love you forever and 2 days, and so on. Eventually, their love pledge had become, I will love you forever and 5 days. After this confession, along with evidence collected, Cathy was placed under arrest. When they went to arrest Gwen in Tyler, Texas, they found that Gwen and her girlfriend had left the trailer they were living in, and it looked as if they were on the run. An APB, which is an all-points bulletin, went out. Not long after the APB went out, an officer just happened to pull up next to a car at a stoplight. He looked over and recognized the driver. That's right, as luck would have it, Gwen and her girlfriend were next to him. He hit the lights, pulled them over, and questioned who they were. After identifying herself, Gwen was taken into custody.
Okay, so that's really stupid. If they were on the run and then she gives her real name when the girl back questions her, she's not too bright, huh?
She's not too bright. She's a little bit low on the scale. Yep.
Okay, so go ahead.
Yep. Cathy confessed to planning the murders, but there was a lack of evidence. If Cathy agreed to testify against Gwen, she would receive a plea agreement. Ken became Cathy's biggest advocate, especially before her sentencing took place. He had written a letter to the Kent County Judge Robert A. Benson, who had taken Cathy's guilty plea. Quote,
I know there will be pressure to give Cathy a major sentence, especially with the nature of the crime and number of victims. Several months ago, when I turned Cathy in, I was seeking one thing: help for Cathy. It's something I've been trying to do for the past 10 years. 10 years ago, I took it upon myself to help a 17-year-old girl who I felt I loved enough to make up for the bad things she had told me. That was the mistake of a 20-year-old boy who dearly wanted to be loved and who wanted to be an important part of someone's life. I was no match for the problems Cathy was having inside, though there were times when I felt it was just a matter of time before Cathy forgot about the past and learned to enjoy the life she had with our daughter and myself. Cathy had a cold mother and a violent father. Love wasn't shown. She couldn't even recognize that my daughter and I were trying to give her our love. I know that Cathy cracked under pressure of married life, of not being able to deal with her past, feeling unloved by people she trusted and depended on, and that Gwen's influence and the influence of excessive drinking, fueled by depression, blocked her better judgment. Cathy needs our help, not our wrath or outrage. Cathy is guilty of taking lives, or at least not preventing Gwen from taking them. But how much life did she really take? All the victims weren't even living. They enjoyed nothing, experienced nothing, and were going to die. The families at the time of death were relieved at the end of their suffering. I know they did not have the right to play God, but when you decide how much of her life should be taken or lost in prison, shouldn't it be equal to what was taken from their victims?
Okay, before we even get into what they thought of that letter, I'm going to let you know that right now I'm vibing that this poor sucker has just been the victim of Cathy completely playing him like a fiddle for the entire time she knows him.
Absolutely.
She's 17 years old. She is playing this 20-year-old kid who now I guess this is 10 years later. So he's a 30-year-old man still completely being played by this chick, Cathy. Cathy is maniacal. That one little letter tells me all I need to know about the maniacalness of Cathy.
Right. Yeah. So
This
initially,
whole thing has just flipped on its head. The thing is that Cathy's the one. She cops to the fact, so she confesses to the fact that she planned the murder. She writes the poems, and she's the one telling about their whole plot that they would put each other in prison if this ever came out. But then she gives Ken everything he needs to blow their world up. So then she can then present it like she's been the victim.
She's
just
a master.
That one right there?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before I get ahead I'm getting ahead of myself again. Every time you tell me these stories, I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself. Just from the little tidbits that you put out there.
Yeah.
So good breadcrumbing.
Yep.
She's a psycho.
She'd be crazy.
Let's go on. What happened?
Okay. All right. So Judge Benson also received other letters before sentencing Cathy from 2 jail ministers, a friend of Cathy's mother, and her sister. Cathy's attorney requested that a letter be read from her Aunt Judith, her father's sister. The letter said, quote,
My earliest memory of Cathy was when she was approximately 3 or 4 years old. I had invited Cathy and her family over to my home in Grand Rapids for dinner. When dinner was almost over, Cathy had asked for an extra portion of fruit salad. Her father proceeded to scoop up large spoonfuls of everything on the table and heaped it over her plate. He then called her a, quote, little fat pig, and told her to eat it all. She cried, and he slapped her for crying. I told them that it was my home and she didn't have to eat it, but my brother said she did. She tried to please him and attempted to choke it down. My brother could be one of the warmest, kindest people, and without warning, turn on you. And the sad part is, I don't know why. Our father, Cathy's grandfather, was a distant person, and he treated John about the same way as John treated Cathy. Cathy was simply not given much attention. Her childhood was not a pleasant one. I remember being in their home several times in the morning for coffee. The children would rise, dress themselves, feed themselves breakfast, be given instructions on what chores they were to do, and then be told to leave the room. As a young teenager, Cathy wanted to be a doctor and help take care of people. She was kind, intelligent, but emotionally starved.
When Catherine entered the courtroom, which, by the way, at this point was her third appearance, she did not speak, but had written a statement that her attorney, Christine Yared, read on her behalf. Quote,
I had been kept in maximum security and totally alone for most of my 10 months, reliving the past. All of the time alone has given me the opportunity to take a long, hard look at myself and my problems. I've learned a lot from this. The most important one being that saying I'm sorry isn't enough. Mere words cannot express the remorse and guilt I'll have to live with all the rest of my life. That, along with the fact that because of this, I'll not be able to watch my baby grow up, is a horrible torment. I was caught in a mess, but I do not excuse my actions or try to blame anyone for my part in this. I don't seek sympathy. I have to take full responsibility for my actions, and I'm prepared to face the consequences. All right, Christine, go.
Oh, really? Seriously? I feel like she's a little bit of a genius when it comes to narcissistic manipulation.
mm-hmm.
Because can we just talk about how she talks about how she's been alone for 10 months and she's so very sorry, and she now realizes how horrible she is. But she also throws in about how she's not going to be able to watch her baby grow up. You know, the same baby that she threw Ken out with and was like, bye.
Yep.
But now all of a sudden when it comes to, oh, woe is me, I'm not going to watch my baby grow up, and I completely take accountability for this because that is what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to give you what you're looking for. But meanwhile, I reached out in those 10 months. I reached out to 2 jail ministers and several friends. My ex-husband totally hoodwinked him. And yeah, I brought in my aunt to write a nice little letter to tell you how fucked up my childhood was, all in a way to orchestrate this pity party.
Exactly. Pulling on the strings.
Like, everything about it.
Mm.
Everything about it just screams, wait, are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
But then here we go, because here we go. So this is going to be a little white privilege right up in here, because this is what's going to happen. I already know. I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself, but I already know. Keep telling me the story, because I feel like I already know.
Okay. All right. So under the statute, the judge had every right to sentence Cathy to life in prison. When the judge asked the assistant prosecutor, David Schreiber, if he had anything to say before sentencing, David said, quote,
Only this, Your Honor. Miss Wood has in all ways fulfilled our plea agreement. She has cooperated fully. She has testified to what we sincerely believe to be the truth as laid out in her plea agreement. We are making arrangements with the Department of Corrections so Cathy could serve her time in a federal prison away from Gwen Graham.
Okay. So that was just more manipulation, and he fell right into it.
Mm-hmm. Sure did.
Okay.
Okay.
So go ahead.
All right.
What does this Mr. Judge say?
So Judge Benson said, quote,
I'm convinced that you truly show remorse, which I think is important. I'm also convinced from what I know of your story, the rather lengthy evidentiary hearing that we had, and what I read about the case in the paper, that you are, in fact, a follower and not a leader. And this again doesn't excuse or justify your actions, but I think it does, in the eyes of the sentencing court, put you in a little different situation.
Judge Benson did give credit to Cathy, for if it wasn't for her, the case would have not been brought to light. He said, quote,
I'm most impressed by the fact that, except for you, this matter never would have been cleared up. This is a sentence which is going to be primarily for punishment, but I don't think you need any particular rehabilitation. If I turned you loose today, I'm convinced that you wouldn't do anything like this again.
Okay, BS.
mm-hmm.
And these judges were hoodwinked, completely hoodwinked, because she didn't just bring this case to light. She made this case happen and then planted the seeds with her act, because she knew that eventually his dumbass would say something to somebody and there would be a big story. And I bet dollars to donuts she wasn't thinking that it would actually go to the cop, but I would almost bet money on it that she wanted it to be a thing. You know, just like, town gossip or melodramatic something or other. I know in my little judgy heart that this chick, Cathy, completely orchestrated this whole thing.
Absolutely.
And she's now gonna not bear, she's still gonna go to prison or whatever, I'm sure. We didn't get there yet, but I'm sure she's gonna go to prison. But she's gonna just point the finger at this chick, Gwen.
Mm-hmm.
And even though Gwen has a bag of her own problems, and again, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because you didn't tell me the whole story yet, but you know me, I gotta be piping in with my vibes. My vibe is that this chick, Cathy, completely pulled the wool over everybody's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And that she was literally the mastermind, literally confessed to being the mastermind.
Mm-hmm.
But yet somehow it's all this chick Gwen's fault, which I think they're equally culpable.
Mm-hmm.
Equally culpable, no doubt. But this chick, Cathy, is on a whole nother level of manipulator.
Right. Well, think about it. She is going to make Gwen pay for leaving her because she left her for another woman. So there will be hell to pay. I mean, she even said that earlier in the story. I mean, that's why they made the pact, right?
Yeah, but I don't know if I believe in the pact. I don't know if I believe in the pact. I think the pact was something that Cathy came up with after the fact when Gwen left her.
Okay.
And she became a bitter, I'm going to get you, sucker.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how that happened. And I don't think that she fully, like I said, I don't think she wanted to go to prison. I don't think she fully understood the magnitude of the Pandora's box that she was opening. She opened that Pandora's box on purpose.
She sure did. Yeah.
She did that crap on purpose.
Yeah.
It was a miscalculated action, but it was calculated nonetheless.
Absolutely.
Can't get me to believe otherwise. I'm seeing how I see it. And I see Cathy as a psychopathic manipulator.
You're not wrong.
Period.
Right.
Period.
Yeah.
So what'd she get?
Okay, so all right, so Cathy was sentenced to 20 to 40 years on second-degree murder and conspiracy charges to be run concurrently. So she didn't get a light sentence. I think she probably thought she might eke it out with a couple years. I don't think she was thinking she was going to get this.
No, but that is, well, yeah, I agree with you. I don't think she plans on getting this. But 20 to 40 years for second-degree murder with concurrent sentences, that means she's only getting 20, maybe 25 years if she keeps manipulating the way she does, and she's a sociopathic, maniacal, but she's a manipulator.
Yep.
So she's going to keep doing her thing, and she's going to be manipulating for the next 20 to 25 years in prison, and then she'll get out. That's still a really light sentence for 5 murders.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I know more people that got pinched for weed that are doing 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's bananas. So that's a pretty light sentence.
So she still made out pretty good. So 21 days later, it was Gwen's turn at sentencing. Unlike Cathy, there were not any letters of support. Gwen was being charged with first-degree murder. Families of the victim wanted Gwen in prison and away from society. There was a criminal background check on Gwen when she was in Tyler, Texas, prior to coming to Michigan. And the only thing she had on her record was that, she had written some bad checks. The judge took note of Gwen's self-mutilation, alcohol and drug use, as well as her reports of sexual abuse. Gwen's mother was contacted by the court for some background on the accusations of the sexual abuse. Gwen's mother said, quote,
"She was not aware of any abuse Gwen may have suffered at the hands of her father."
During Gwen's sentencing trial, she had maintained that she was innocent. The examiner described Gwen as subdued, cooperative, but also despondent. Gwen said, quote,
"I'm mad as hell. I'm so angry that I can't believe it. I can't believe these people would come back and convict me of these crimes. I am not guilty of killing anybody. This was a joke that got carried too far, and I'm not going to give up. I think that eventually I will be found not guilty, and the day will come that I will walk out of prison."
The examiner did agree on the mandatory life sentence, but requested the Department of Corrections treat her with, quote,
"intense psychotherapy. She has never been analyzed or treated by members of the mental health community, and she has obvious deep-seated psychological problems that need to be properly addressed before she can learn to function in either a closed or an open environment."
The psychoanalysis of it, I need to back the trucks up for a minute, because in the first part, last week, when we talked about this, I remember there was a part where I said, well, the whole thing with Gwen being really distraught about this elderly woman, like, that's sus to me, because we're talking about her being a murderess, all this and that. And now, after we hear about Cathy and we have dived in and we get all these letters and then we hear her statement and she's being calculated and cold still in the courtroom and she's trying to be very subservient and all of that. She's playing the game to me. I feel like it's a big game for her.
Mm-hmm.
And she's obviously a little psychotic. I mean, and now we can trace it back to at 17 years old, she's playing this 20-year-old boy that she obviously played him very well, whipped him good, where he's still on Team Cathy. And then we get to Gwen, where It's seemingly like she did really have a crappy life just as well. And she's also an excessive drinker and heavy into drugs and self-mutilating. This chick, Gwen, is literally, her thing is she's not trying to play any games. She's just outright mad as hell is what she said, right? Saying, I'm mad as hell. What if she really didn't know all about it? What if she thought it was a story? What if Cathy was really doing all of these on her own and roped Gwen into it? What if Cathy was killing Gwen's patient, being like it was a pact between them? Like, there's a lot of what ifs here. This chick, Gwen, is just going to take the fire. Like, that's a possibility.
It is a possibility because Cathy's crazy.
Because this chick, Gwen, is obviously, self-mutilation, alcohol, drug, all that. So she obviously has some deep-seated problems, right? She obviously has some mental health issues that, yes, I agree with the judge wholeheartedly that she needed intensive therapy. She seemingly is acting like, really? For real? These were just stories that she fucking used to tell me about. Do you know what I mean? What if Gwen really thought it was just stories and jokes and fun? I mean, they did BDSM, right? They did masochistic stuff in bed for fun.
Yeah.
What if they told each other stories masochistically? What if Gwen is coming from that place and now here she is? What? I'm like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
There's a possibility. There's a whole other HBO special up in just that little bit right there.
I know, for real. And, I'm going to read a little bit further, and it's really interesting what her evaluation turned out. You're gonna appreciate it. So on November 1, 1989, Gwen kept silent in front of Judge Roman Snow. She was sentenced to serve a mandatory life prison term for each of the 5 murder counts and a life term for the conspiracy conviction. There will not be any chance of parole or governor's pardon for Gwen. She is serving her life of imprisonment at the Women's Huron Valley Correctional Facility in Pittsfield, Charter Township in Michigan. If you're wondering if Gwen was ever psychologically evaluated, she was evaluated by a Dr. Michael Abramsky. She underwent a computerized test called the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, also referred to as MMPI. Gwen was described as, quote,
a disturbed young woman. She was hostile, resentful, and sullen, given to occasional violent outbursts. She was likely to have major problems in interpersonal relationships, likely to have poor judgment. She is attracted to danger and undaunted by punishment. Outwardly, she may appear aggressive, assertive, competitive, and dominating. Emotionally, she is dependent and passive dependent. She was given the War-Sack test, which is the ink blot test. Her reactions were slow and not spontaneous at all. She had difficulty seeing people, faces, or animals. She only really reacted when she saw a large ink pattern when she shouted, "A pregnant monster!"
Gwen was also given a TAT test, which is a thematic apperception test. It's similar to the Rorschach, but less abstract. This test involved drawings versus ink blots. Gwen would struggle with these tests as well. Quote,
Gwen has a tremendous block against any kind of mature activity whatsoever. Her sense of morality was called primitive, and that she is amoral only in the lowest stages.
The results of all the testing was sent to a panel of psychologists, and they all agreed that Gwen was a, quote,
low-functioning borderline personality.
Abramsky explained that, quote, a borderline personality is one of several disorders that develop in the first couple years of life and invariably continue through adulthood. Low functioning means Gwen was of lower intelligence and sophistication, unlike high-functioning borderlines who attain greater intellectual and social status. Abramsky goes on to say, quote, the mother-child bond is a very fundamental type of thing. The borderline's central problem is that a bonding relationship never occurs with the mother. Gwen did mention that when she was a little girl, she didn't like to be hugged, kissed, or snuggled, so her mother didn't do these things with her. Abramsky continues, quote, if the bonding does not happen, the child's personality is stunted at that stage of emotional development, remaining primitive as the person grows into adulthood. The personality is hardly formed, hence, on the borderline. Their entire life is spent having these passionate attachments to people, followed by constant tragic breakups. Therefore, a kind of faulty bonding occurs like a stunted plant. A real foundation for growth has never been established. The relationship to reality is somewhat tenuous. At times, they experience the phenomena of not being real. A lot of times, they will come apart when a bond with someone is broken. They can't handle conflict or work through it logically. The burning phenomena and self-mutilation is a way for them to ground themselves in reality. The pain somehow makes them feel real. Gwen is afraid of being washed down the drain. She has the feeling she's going to be sucked down. There's no sense of self or solidity around her. The feeling that you can be sucked through those little holes in the bathtub is a childlike perception. It's appropriate for little kids because they don't have a good, firm ego boundary. Those develop as you mature. Gwen understands right and wrong in the sense of someone saying, that is right and that is wrong. But when you talk about empathy, the ability to put ourselves in someone else's place, she lacks that. Her behavior is asocial. She is essentially amoral. Think of her like a 2.5-year-old kid. A lot of what she does, such as the childlike picture she draws, makes a lot of sense. She's never really functioned beyond that level. Abramsky goes on to say, quote, the whole thing of plotting or spelling murder is not the way of Gwen's mind. It's not how it works at all.
Exactly. Maybe Gwen didn't know. So then you put somebody in prison and you tell them that they're doing 5 consecutive life jail sentences. I think the disconnect from reality would make more sense to me if this girl went to prison for something she thought was just a sick, twisted, made-up game. So, like, that just adds more fuel to my conspiracy theory on this one.
Okay.
I feel like they got this all wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Cathy was the mastermind. Because just like you said, that's not how Gwen's mind worked before prison, before she got psychoanalyzed.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was crying uncontrollably at the death of an elderly person.
Right.
At a home, for lack of a better way to say it, where older people go to die. You know what I mean?
Right.
She was crying because one of them did just that. This crime takes certain conceptualizations, right?
Mm-hmm.
It takes planning, timing, and someone who really knows how to play chess.
Exactly.
Cathy appears to be that kind of person. Bright and manipulative.
Yep.
Manipulative AF.
Yep.
That's a higher kind of cognitive process that Gwen was capable of before or after her psychoanalysis.
I think Cathy absolutely saw this girl as, and I'm sorry to say it, but I'm just going to say she's a half-wit, right? She's got a mind that's stuck like a child in a woman's body.
She's a childlike dependent.
And Abramsky further explains that the one image that did emerge from Gwen's unconscious was extremely telling. Rorschach tests when she saw in the big blot the pregnant monster symbolized the mother for whom she yearned, and the evil produced by their failure to bond. The murders were a love bond, but not a bond of a lesbian kind. The murders were a bonding behavior, a symbolic bonding. The two of them created their own little world, Gwen and her surrogate mother. She was the good little girl that did what Mom wanted, to win the mom's favor, and to Gwen, the whole thing was simply play. Yes, the pregnant monster was Gwen's mother, but I also believe the pregnant monster is Cathy Wood. Now, how about that for an eye-opener, Christine?
Yeah, I kind of agree with that little piece of it.
So, according to the plea deal for Cathy, she was not to be housed in the same facility as Gwen. But the Kent County jailers had sent Gwen to the same woman's Huron Valley Correctional Facility as Cathy before Cathy was able to transfer to a federal prison. One day, when Cathy was picking up her mail in prison, she all of a sudden ran into the prison staff lounge, which, by the way, is absolutely prohibited. Cathy was screaming and freaking out because she had walked by Gwen in the hall. Immediately, Cathy reached out to Deputy Warden, who held a PhD for protective custody. The warden said, quote, Cathy was exceptionally convincing. She was downright erudite, which basically meant she could speak to him at a clinical level as though she was responding to my title. Her request to be transferred to a federal prison was quickly granted. On February 1st, 1990, Cathy was transferred from the Huron Valley Women's Facility to a federal correctional facility in Lexington, Kentucky. With that being said, Cathy ended up serving her time in Tallahassee, Florida at the Federal Women's Correctional Institution and was released on January 16, 2020. Now, I could not find why she was transferred to Florida. I double-checked the book. I looked online. I don't see how or why she was transferred, so I don't know if it had to do with just patient population overload or what was going on there. After her release from prison, Cathy went to live with her sister in Fort Mill, South Carolina. Her parole will end in 2021. Her parole is clearly over. We're in 2024. After that, she is free to work with the elderly and children if she chooses. But for Gwen, she will never leave prison alive.
Okay, can we just go back to the fact that Cathy is so good at manipulation that she freaked out and ran in for protective custody and to be transferred and all this, and was very intelligent in the way she was speaking to them that impressed them enough that they immediately transferred her to federal prison as she asked for, because she's apparently a very skilled manipulator.
Yeah.
Can I just point that out? But why did she desperately not want to be in jail with Gwen? Is it because she didn't want Gwen to kill her for keeping her in prison for something that she did?
I really don't know.
Is it because she didn't want Gwen to know that she only got 20 to 40 years when Gwen is going to die there? Like, guilty, guilty, guilty. All of it just screams hella, hella guilty. And then she literally just played the system. This chick is now out free, working probably as an aide somewhere, or probably home health or something, and she's killing other people. Are you kidding me?
She might keep herself in check, but I kind of think that her big fuss, her big to-do over not being in jail with Gwen is just playing the part that she played when she was in court and all that shit. You know what I mean? I don't think it was anything more than that other than keeping up with the game.
Keeping up with the lie, keeping up with the story. And if they were in the same jail, I mean, jails are like overgrown high schools on steroids. In jail, rumors fly and it's a telephone game. You know what I mean? So if someone's seen Cathy and Gwen's reaction to Cathy or vice versa, I mean, the cat would have been out of the bag in a matter of 2 weeks, would have known everything there was to know about both of them, and some, because the telephone game works that way.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, it would have been diluted, polluted, and exaggerated to the 10th power. But my point is that Cathy was intelligent enough to know that. That's why she wanted to get away. Because at no point in time, at least you didn't tell me that Cathy was afraid of Gwen. So why? Why couldn't they be in the same prison then?
Well, I think going back to what you just said, because, right, the two of them are in prison together. She's yakking, the other one's yakking. So who knows? What's that sharp thing I couldn't think of before and I forget again? Shank? Maybe she would have gotten shanked for her lies and her manipulation.
Yeah, but that's why Cathy wanted out of that.
Right.
Cathy was the one that was going to get shanked.
Exactly.
The dirty one.
Right.
Cathy's the one that thought it all up, including screwing it all up.
Yep.
I don't know. I think this is another one for the book. I'm glad they both went to prison.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
They both should have, because even if Gwen thought it was a joke, and even if Gwen is a little off her rocker, killing is killing is killing.
Yep.
You should pay the piper. So yes, they both should have gone to prison, but I'm thinking that they both should have.
They both should have got life in prison as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, they both should have rotted in prison. The fact that this chick Cathy got out is malarkey.
It sure is. So,
yeah, that's crazy to me.
Yeah.
I mean, she's the one with the borderline disorder.
Yeah, she's maniacal.
Just for the simple lack of love she has for her offspring. With everything else we've learned about her, even without a psychoanalysis of Cathy, she's obviously got a mixed bag. I think Gwen, because the psychoanalysis that they got of her with the Rorschach ink blot test and all that, some of it I feel like, hello, this is an alcoholic drug addict that then you locked up and you're going to try and therapize. Just the addiction in and of itself are going to make her despondent. Just the addiction and the withdrawal are going to make her snap and not really seem like she can function too well. So to go back on that and say that that was all because of her horrible childhood, I call BS on that, only because she lived a functioning life. I mean, it wasn't the best of jobs, but she had a job. She obviously had a car. She had a home. Nowhere in there did she say she was homeless at any point in time. I'm thinking low functioning is not one of the things that we throw out there for this woman that was obviously functioning in society. Have at least mid to high level of any kind of disorder to be functioning at all in society. Because how many people do we have on Skid Row that are not really functioning? Millions, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
And this girl wasn't one of them. So she was most definitively not a low-functioning borderline. That I call BS, BS, BS.
And there it is.
And there's my 2 cents.
Christine has psychoanalyzed everything.
Not really, but it might sound that way.
Exactly. All right, everybody. Well, that wraps up Season 1, Episode 6, Part 2, Catherine Woods and Gwendolyn Graham, The Lethal Lovers. Come back next week.
That was our first 2-parter. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I had fun with it.
I know. It was fun. It was an interesting story, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it did involve kids.
Yeah, I guess when the audience starts to get to know us a little bit better, they'll realize all my little quips about how you're trying to get at me. We start this series out about talking about kids. And now here we are, only a couple episodes in, and we're talking about murdering lesbians. I don't know. I feel like Tracy's out to get me.
I just got to keep throwing some curveballs, that's all.
I'm just teasing everybody, just teasing, just jokes.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming around for another Malice Monday, and I hope you guys catch us again next week.
Yeah, come back next week, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Bye.